Hello and how are you, my students? I believe you are still safe and healthy. Once again, I'm teacher Ibrahim, your teacher for general studies and communication skills. You need to remember this program is brought to you by the Rwanda Education Board in partnership with MASTERCARD Foundation and Inspire, Educate and Empower Rwanda. As we all know that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the government of Rwanda closed schools in March, and this was done to control the spread of the virus among the people, and for that reason we have to study from home until schools open. Today we are talking about writing speeches. We will talk about what a speech is and how to write and present a good speech. I hope you have your notebooks and your pens ready. You need to write for revision. You also make sure that there is no noise around you, because this is a very important skill that we have to learn today. Let us start by defining what a speech is. Try and think about what a speech is for a moment. Now, let us compare that idea you have with this. I'll give you my definition and a few other important notes or things to note about a speech. First, a speech refers to an address or a spoken expression of ideas. A speech refers to an address or the spoken expression of ideas, opinions, or facts that is delivered by someone who is speaking to an audience. Speeches are very important in our official and our social life. One may have listened to very many speeches. You may have listened to very many speeches in different situations. There are those that are still fresh in our minds, and yet there are those that we have already forgotten. And this is because some speeches moved and made us feel something. They moved us maybe to think about something, to take an important action, to make an important decision, or just they touched us emotionally. These speeches that are forgotten had very little effect on us, and that is why they have already faded away from our memory. And when you look at these two speeches, there is a reason as to why a speech will be remembered. There is a reason as to why a speech will be forgotten. When someone makes an address or speaks about ideas, opinions, and facts, there are reasons as to why you will remember these things that this person has spoken about. Probably you'll remember these things because this person talked about something that inspired you to do something. Maybe this person spoke about something that helped you to make an important decision. Maybe this person said something that touched you emotionally. And this is a kind of speech that you'll remember. But a speech that does not do any of those three things, you will not remember. You will so easily forget because it has very little effect on you as a person. It does not inspire you or motivate you to do anything. At the end of the day, you will simply forget this speech without even thinking about it. Some speeches are delivered spontaneously, and people don't really prepare so much, or they don't prepare at all to make these speeches. We call these spontaneous speeches. And then there are those speeches that are always written before they are spoken, because a spontaneous speech will be inspired by the moment. You are in a moment, maybe you attend a function and you didn't prepare to speak, but then someone asks you to come and say something. Okay, say, all right, we are going to ask Ibrahim here, or we are going to call on Peter to come and say something to us, but you didn't prepare anything. Now you will simply look at whatever is going on and you will speak about that. But you also have to sometimes to remember that there are speeches that must be prepared, especially these official speeches, maybe by the president, by sometimes the ministers. These speeches are sometimes prepared, and they are prepared before they are delivered to whoever is listening. A written speech could be based on a sketched out notes. Maybe you have a few notes before you write the speech. You put down some notes, and the speaker will add more information as he presents the speech. Normally, when sometimes the president may read a speech, or maybe will have a few notes that he has written down, and then as he speaks about these things in the order in which he has written them down, he will add extra information, because remember, sometimes the people around you will give you ideas of things that you could say as you make a speech. Now, in other cases, the speech can be written in total detail, like not notes, not simple notes, but every word, word for word, written down, and you don't have to say anything else apart from what has been written to you. And sometimes these speeches, they are normally very short. Sometimes speeches that are long, may find that the person wrote just a few notes. Sometimes you cannot control the time in which you speak, because you cannot control the idea, the amount of ideas that come in your head. Sometimes ideas come at a very high rate, and for that reason, you may speak for a very long time. But if the speech is written in complete detail, like everything that you're going to say is written down, then the speech usually tends to be short.
Come along and play with us.
Now, speech writing a speech is a process. You cannot simply just end up with a speech. There is a process, and there are steps that you must make sure that you follow. And you have to ensure that the content that you're going to write is both meaningful and interesting to listen to. Because if the things that you're going to say don't make any sense and they are not interesting to listen to, then your speech will so easily be forgotten. The speech needs to capture the attention of the audience. The people you are listening to must be attentive, but not attentive because you are speaking. They should be attentive because of what you are saying. I hope you understand the difference. There's a difference between people being attentive because you are speaking, and also being attentive because of what you are saying. What you're saying should be more important than you simply speaking. That's why you need to prepare meaningful and interesting things that you should speak. And you also need to organize and express these ideas in a very logical way, like in a sensible way, in a proper way. Like, people should understand what you're saying in the order in which you're saying it, without having to confuse people. Therefore, a speech should be well organized, easy to understand, and should fit the intended audience. If people are going to listen to the speech, it should be very organized, easy to understand, and suitable for the people who are listening. Because if the people who are listening don't understand what you're saying, or it does not make sense to them. For example, if a minister is going to speak to university students, his speech that he gives to the university students cannot be the same as that which he gives to nursery school kids. The nursery school children will expect different things. They will understand at a different level. So you must make sure that what you're saying is suitable to the people that you're saying it to, if you're making a speech. It is also important to analyze your audience in terms of age, gender, cultural background, and profession. And then also remember to look at the occasion. Like, if it's an event, what kind of event is it? Is it a funeral? The things you say at a funeral are different from the things you say at a celebration, maybe a national celebration, let's say Independence Day. The things you say on Independence Day are going to be different from maybe when you are asked to give a short speech at the opening of a national soccer match. Maybe the national team is going to play. Maybe Amavubi is going to play the Uganda Cranes. The things you say as the Minister of Sports on that occasion are different from the things you will say at the opening of a match between two local teams, because the occasion is different. And then you also remember, why are you speaking? The purpose of the speech. It is very important to put into consideration the reason as to why you are speaking. Now, a good speech normally should not exceed 20 minutes. So when you're speaking, make sure your speech does not exceed 20 minutes, because people may get bored, and also depending on the occasion, and also because there could be other people who may want to speak or who may have to speak after you. If you're speaking after maybe 10 people have spoken, then you also need to consider the fact that at that time people are tired. If you're speaking at the beginning of the function, you also need to remember that other people who will have to speak. So your speech should not be very long, and it should not be too short again. You have to keep it within a reasonable amount of time, a reasonable duration. Now, when faced with the task of writing a speech, you will experience some difficulties coming up with ideas, of course. But it is possible to make progress if you follow some simple steps. And these steps are the things that we are going to look at.
Come along and play with us.
Step 1 is the first thing you need to consider is, before you even begin writing your outline or your speech, you must consider 3 things. What is your topic? What are you going to talk about? And then number 2, what is the purpose of your speech? Why are you speaking? Do you want to persuade people? Do you want to educate people? To persuade is to convince people to do something. Do you want to educate people? Or do you simply want to inform them? If you want to inform people, there's a way you will speak. There's a different kind of tone. You will sound different from a person who is going to convince people. If you are simply educating people, you also have to sound different. Because if you're educating people, teaching people, you tend to explain more than when you're simply informing them. If you are convincing people, there's also a different kind of tone. You must make whatever you're saying interesting. Whatever you want people, you tend to make sure that whatever you are trying to convince them of is interesting and better than whatever alternative they may have. And then you also need to remember, number 3, you must remember who your audience is. Who are you going to speak to? Remember what, number 1, your topic. What are you going to talk about? Number 2, why are you speaking? Number 3, what audience are you going to speak to as you prepare your speech? If you're simply a speechwriter for somebody else, you must also remember these things, because you're planning for the other person. You're going to write the things the other person is going to say. If you're writing a speech for the minister, you're writing a speech for the senator, you're writing a speech for the president, you need to remember that you are now speaking on behalf of the other person. You're writing the things, you're thinking on the person's behalf. You have to know all these things. That's why before you write the person's speech, you ask them, what are you going to talk about? Why are you going to speak? What is the purpose of your speech? And then you also ask them, who are you going to talk to? If he's going to talk to university students, it's different. If he's going to talk to a group of farmers, the things are going to be different. The language, the kind of words the person will use will depend on who they are going to speak to. Now, next you need to come up with what we call a lead paragraph. But before you go to that, you plan your speech. Plan your speech, which involves preparing for a well-organized speech in terms of occasion. We have talked about occasion, audience, and topic. And then the nature of the occasion, determines the duration of your speech. How long you're going to speak for. I told you if you're speaking before the opening of a football game, people are waiting for the game. Maybe people are waiting your opening. Maybe you are speaking before the launch of a music show, maybe a movie. There is a reason as why people have come. They have come to watch the football match or to watch the movie. So if you're speaking before the match starts, you must make sure that you understand that you are not the most important person at that event. The most important thing at the event is what they have come to watch. If it is a funeral, you must understand, okay, now I'm speaking at the funeral, people are sad. Look at what you're going to say, how you sound, and then you also need to understand what does your audience expect. If you are known to be a funny person, your audience will always expect that when you speak, you give them a very nice joke. So you prepare a few jokes in your speech. Then the intended message of your speech will always communicate the theme. And knowing the type of your audience will help you come up with useful information or content to use for your speech. If you understand the audience and what they want, then you must prepare something. If you're going for an election campaign, the things you say, you are trying to convince people to vote for you. So you are being persuasive. As you convince people, there are certain things these people who are at an election campaign expect to hear. They expect you to come up with policies, to suggest ideas that will make them better or that will make their life much better. So if you're speaking, you make sure you put this into consideration.
Come along and play with us.
Now, when you come to the structure of your speech, you need to remember to have an introduction that captivates the audience. That is what we call the lead paragraph, which involves introducing yourself, first of all, acknowledge your audience, look at the audience. There's something we call protocol. Starting from the most important people to the general. So, for example, most of you speak in debates at school. You start from the chairman, or maybe if there's a chief guest at your function, you start with the chief guest, you go to the other people that are below the chief guest, but in order of their importance. And then create something that we call a hook, something that will keep your audience engaged on what you're going to be talking about. And then captivate your audience. Number 2, you need to provide background information about your topic. Your audience will need to know certain things before you start talking about your theme or your topic. You need to give them a little background information in general terms. And then you give what we call a thesis or a statement that clearly states your argument. If you are trying to talk to people, maybe you are educating them, try to explain, come up with something that tells them what exactly you're talking about and explain it to them so that they understand. Like, for example, today, because we are talking about a speech or speech writing, we had to explain what a speech is and understand why a speech is very important. There are some things that we need to know about speech writing, and those things are the ones that we started with. And then, as you move on, there is what we call the body paragraphs. In the body, because you start with the introduction, where you have a paragraph in which you introduce yourself, you acknowledge your audience, and you you explain to them, you give them some background information on what you're going to be speaking about. Then you move on to the body paragraphs. You will write more paragraphs in which you expound or explain more about your topic. And in this, you have to support or prove whatever you're talking about. You explain in more detail. Normally, you need to have about 3 points to support your idea, whatever. If you're telling people to vote for you, for instance, you normally give about 3 points. 3 reasons as to why these people should vote for you. Because you don't want to speak for so long. If you're talking about a person, there's something called a eulogy at a funeral. If you're speaking about the person who is dead, we call it a eulogy, or we call it eulogizing the person who has died. Now, if you're trying to eulogize a person, you don't say very many things about the person. You say about 3 or 4 very important things that this person, for example, should be remembered for. And then, for each idea that you're trying to express or explain, make sure you follow a formula called PIE. P-I-E. P stands for proving with logic, which means you have facts, statistics, and expert testimony. If you're going to say, this man has been very generous, then you must have facts or statistics or testimony that is really, that can really help the people that you're speaking to understand how generous this man has been. If you're speaking about, maybe you're teaching people the importance of democracy, you tell people democracy has done this, or democracy can do this, then you explain with facts. You can give examples of democratic countries and how well they have performed. Then you interpret the logic for your audience. If you have an idea, that is the I. I stands for interpret. Whatever idea you present, in whatever way you say it, you must make sure that you interpret it for your audience. You explain and make sure that they understand what you're saying. And then last, there's something we call emotional appeal. E stands for emotional appeal, which means you use language that can touch the people that are listening to you. Your audience needs to be captivated. I told you that. If your audience is not captivated, then you are not speaking to them. You don't want to have an audience that will go out of the speech, and when someone asks them, what did the man say? Then people will simply say, the man spoke. The man talked. But when they ask them what they talked or what you said, they don't remember. That's why I told you, if you are speaking, make sure people pay attention to you because of what you're saying, not because you are speaking. People pay attention to you because of what you're saying, not because you are speaking. I hope you understand what I am saying.
Come along and play with us.
Then, you also need to keep your audience engaged. That's how people will be able to remember what you're saying. You need to help them be part of your speech. In a way, they should be able to follow your argument. Use transitional words or phrases such as my first point, before I conclude, the third reason, in addition to the above. You connect these things for them and ensure that they are following you. You also need to help them sometimes by addressing them by their names. If they are in the audience and you know someone is in the audience, or maybe in groups or as individuals, you can address them by name. It helps a lot to capture your attention. For example, even when we are at school and the teacher is teaching us, sometimes our teachers are forced to call us by name to ensure that we are paying attention. Now, in the conclusion part, when you go to the conclusion, you make sure you re-emphasize your theme or your topic, and then the purpose of your speech. This makes your conclusion summarize what you have been saying. Then before you go, you make sure you put in place what we call a call to action. You make it clear that people have to do something because of your speech. That's why we said a speech that is remembered must have inspired somebody to do something, must have motivated somebody to make a decision. It must have helped you realize something, learn something. And speakers must leave, good speakers always leave their audience thinking about what to do next as a result of what they have said. Therefore, in your speech, make sure you task people with something. Make sure you ask them to do something, because if you're speaking, you must have something you're speaking about. Ask them to do something about, maybe in your speech there's a problem you acknowledged. Make sure you put in place this speech. Your speech must have a call to action. And then before you leave, make sure you thank your audience. You thank them for listening.
Come along and play with us.
So, in our next lesson, I want us to remember or be ready to look at what the elements of a good speech are. We are going to look at the elements of a good speech and the qualities of a good speaker. We shall look at the elements of a good speech and the qualities of a good speaker. But before we go, these are the steps I want us to go through again. The steps of writing a good speech. One, you plan your speech by acknowledging or thinking about your audience, the purpose for which you're writing, and then the theme or the topic that you're writing about or you're going to speak about. Secondly, you put your speech in 3 different parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. In the introduction, we said you must make sure you captivate your audience, you introduce yourself and acknowledge everyone that is present, and then you introduce your theme or your topic. In the body of the speech, you organize your information, you explain your ideas with valid facts and relevant examples or any experiences that you may want to help you to explain what you have said. And then at the end, you summarize your speech and remember to inspire or motivate these people to and you call them to action. And then lastly, you thank your audience in your speech. So we will look at the elements of a good speech and the qualities of a good speaker. Have a great time. I hope to see you next time. Stay safe by following the Ministry of Health guidelines on COVID-19. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time. Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time.